beginning of the school year is a great time to take a look at your child's IEP. Chances are good that if you don't stay on top of things, nobody will. Yes, you'll get the call or the email that says, oh, it's time for your annual IEP. But really, in order to stay on top of your game, to make sure that the IEP is being implemented from the very first day of school until the last day of school, that requires advocacy, and it requires you to know sometimes a little bit more about all of this than other professionals that you're working with. So on today's episode, we're talking about IEPs, right? So there's just a couple things I wanted to go over that you guys need to be aware of in your IEP. So first of all, just know that you can have an IEP meeting anytime you want. Yes, if you want, you can have that one annual IEP meeting per school year. I don't suggest that. I suggest at least two, sometimes even more, depending upon the needs of your child and the situation, what's happening at the school. But so if your child's annual is in the fall, then have a meeting in the fall, the annual, and then have another meeting, an interim IEP in the spring, and vice versa. I just think it's really good to make sure that the school knows that you're going to be monitoring things, that you are engaged, and especially if you have a young child or a child that's brand new to the school. So let's say your kid is 12 and they just started middle school. You're setting the precedent right now of what they can expect from you as a parent for the next 3 years. So if you're kind of absent, they're going to think, well, she'll show up when we need her to, and we don't have to deal with her otherwise, or him. So you want to make sure that they know and that you're giving off a message that you are a parent who is involved in your child's education and in their overall learning. So when it comes to the IEP itself, you want to keep track of the due date. So you should pencil that in on your calendar right now as you listen to this. Pencil it in so that you know, because I've seen lots of times where the school will call the parent a week, 2 weeks before and say, oh, forgot, we got to have an IEP meeting. And then sometimes the IEP looks very much like it did last year, which should not happen. So the IEP should contain the current skill level. There is a reason that it's called the present level of performance. There should not be data in there from a year ago. So you want to make sure that everything gets updated, that there are actual assessments that are given that give them the data, not just somebody's opinion or, how they think your child is doing. But on the IEP document itself, not on the part that they write in about your child, but on the document itself, it says assessments. They have to put assessments in there. So make sure they're using those. And it's really good to, what they say, compare apples to apples. So if they use the diagnostic assessment of reading to evaluate reading last year, I encourage you to request the same, because what you're going to want to do is look to see, did my child make progress? And on that particular assessment, it breaks reading down into 5 different areas. And so you're going to pull out the old plan, you're going to pull out the new one, and you're going to compare to see, did my child make progress? Because if they didn't, then you have a problem. And that has nothing to do with your child's disability or their level of being able to do well in school. Every student should make progress in school. Every single one, no matter who they are. And if they are not, then basically it's babysitting and you're sending your child there for 6 hours or more a day. So you want to make sure that there is learning that's happening. Annual goals. It's actually the goals in the IEP that drive the placement. So if you are a parent who's really interested, hopefully, in inclusionary education, then you have to be aware of the goals. Because if the goals say, Johnny will, take turns within a small group setting or within one-on-one, then that's going to be a separate setting. That's going to be a small group setting. It's not going to be a regular education classroom with 18 to 25 students. So you just want to make sure that your annual goals are going to be beneficial for an entire year, but you can always come back halfway through the year and write new goals if you have to write new goals. But just be aware that they do drive the placement. Okay, so be aware of that. Progress tracking. And, the beginning of the school year is the time to let your teachers know that you are going to want to see the data. Schools are required to keep data. But my experience is that when we ask for data, everybody kind of looks at each other and like, yeah, we're going to get back to you. And so do they have the data? I don't know. But you want them to know that you're going to want to see the data. So like I said, it's a good time right now to let them know right up front, you're going to want to see the data. And then you can kind of work with the teacher to figure out how often. So once every 9 weeks. A progress report is not data. Progress report is just letting you know how your child's doing on their goals. That is not data. I liked data on a graph, personally. So if I'm talking about reading, I want to see, is that line moving upwards, which is what you want? Is it flatlining or is it going down? Because I see that sometimes too when kids are not getting the instruction that they need. That's why data is important. So progress reports don't really give you that kind of information. Special ed services. So those are the services like speech and language therapy, specialized instruction in reading. And there could be specialized instruction, intensive instruction, occupational therapy. I mean, there's direct services and as well as related services on IEPs. It's all dependent upon your child and their needs. Many kids have paraprofessional support. That is not an instructional service. Those people who provide that service are not what we call non-instructional personnel. So they do not go on as an IEP, on an IEP for the instructional services. But they can definitely be written into the accommodation section, into the special consideration section. There's a variety of different places that those can go on an IEP. Let's see, duration of services. So it's a year, right? But we also wanted to make sure that the opportunities. So a goal is considered mastered when any of us can do whatever it is 80% of the time or in 4 out of 5 opportunities. So if you have an IEP that says 60%, 50%, 3 out of 5 opportunities, that's not considered mastery level. So you need to be mindful of that and just understand what mastery level is. Participation in a regular education classroom. Again, your goals on your IEP are going to really drive that. I have met a lot of people who like to see a whole bunch of goals on their kid's IEP, and they also want inclusive education. And the school will very easily have a leg up on winning that argument if they want the child to stay in special ed, because they will say that, well, your child has way too many goals for us to work on in a regular inclusive setting. Now, you can certainly have supports brought into the regular education classroom that would work on goals. But when you have a lot of goals that require a special educator to be implementing the goals, that is going to affect your inclusive education. So just be mindful of that. Stay focused on the goals that are most important. Go back to that data. Make sure that it is accurate data. Testing accommodations. I don't know a child with a disability that does not need testing accommodations. So some kids need one-on-one so that they can read out loud. I know my son needed that when he was little. He needed to be able to read out loud in order to process what he was actually reading. That's an allowable accommodation, but he can't be reading in a group of kids because then they won't have to read it. They'll hear him reading it. So just be thinking about that. Extra time, small group setting, paper testing versus computer. There's all kinds of different accommodations. So if you don't know all of the available accommodations, you can go on to the Department of Education and look at online and look at the list of potential testing accommodations and classroom accommodations as well. Transition. So transition is a little bit different. So transition in state of Florida starts at age 12. I'd say that most states it's at age 14, some it is 16. But it's during that time when you're really supposed to focus across the whole IEP on what is the student going to achieve after school is over and they're now an adult and they're no longer attending school. At least not, lower school. They might be going on to college or trade school. But in those plans, everything that the group talks about should be leading to that best outcome. So for instance, if you have a teenager who has a really hard time making decisions and is afraid that when they're faced with a decision that they have to make, that one is right and one is wrong, which is not always the case. When we are going to choose what we're going to have for dinner, right? How many houses out there about 5 o'clock every day go, oh, what are we going to eat today? Because I know we're guilty in my home. And so it's not that it's a right or a wrong, but it's still a decision. And so many people with autism are not given the opportunities to make decisions. And so there's no surprise that many of them as adults have a really hard time and very stressful time making decisions. So you want to make sure that you build into the IEP everything that has to do with moving on from school into the world as a whole. Okay, I hope that you got some benefits from this, and thank you for checking in with me today. And just watch out for more of these episodes, and we'll be bringing information to you shortly about something called No Limits Global, and we hope you guys are going to check that out because we've got some truly tremendous speakers from literally across the globe. It's going to be like a life-changing event for so many different people. And so we want you guys to be aware of that. You can go to autismfl.org and you will find the information there as soon as it's up and going, which should be pretty soon. All right. Okay. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.